this episode, Baby Vader sneaks up on us and makes us join the dark side. But we return to the light and use all the glue in the galaxy. Hi guys, and welcome back to the show. Today we start building a mobile stand for my table saw. So let's not waste any more time and get right down to it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use this IKEA lock table simply because I had it. Then I have another shelf that I'm going to screw underneath. The casters that are lockable both in direction and in rolling will be mounted in the back of it. Now the shop only had two casters of the same size, probably because of the current situation. So I'm going to use this 2x4 and cut it the same height as these. And that will have to do until I can get some casters the same size. And then I plan to route out some tracks and use some plywood panels to cover the sides. That will also give the structure a lot more rigidity. My plan is to make it so that the top of the saw is just slightly above the top of my workbench here. That way I can feed stuff out the door if I like, or I can turn the saw and use my workbench as an outfeed table. Luke, I am Nomad Makes. The first thing I did was to clamp the lock table down to the shelf I'm going to use as a base, and then I drew around it to get the shape and size correct. Then I could line those lines up with the splinter guard of my track saw track and clamp it down with some Bessie clamps. I could then measure the depth I needed the cut to be and dial that in on the track saw. Then I did a scoring cut first, followed by a full depth cut afterwards. Over at the miter saw I cut the legs to length, and I used the stop block on the right side to make sure they are equal. After that I just drew around the legs to make sure I could drill in the correct spots. To mark the spots for the screws for the casters I used a Sharpie. Here you can see the type of casters I chose, that they are both lockable in rolling and turning. Then I brought out the unsung hero of my workshop, my Bosch handheld drill, and screwed the casters in place. I had to use some washers because the holes on these types of casters are always very large. And I've seen some people use through bolts for them, but I think this will be plenty strong. To figure out how much I needed to cut the legs, I placed the lock table on top of the base and then the saw on top of that. And then I just measured it against the tabletop. And I gave myself about 12 millimeters of slack in case of compression of the wheels and stuff like that. I rose the blade to the full extension and actually needed to use the whole capacity of this saw to be able to cut the legs. As you can see here, I set up a stop block against the fence to prevent the offcuts to be caught in between the fence and the blade, which can cause kickback and it's really dangerous. So every time you do cross cuts like this using the fence, always use a sacrificial piece that stops before the blade. The last time I chopped the lock table, the legs were not hollow like this, or perhaps the cap at the bottom were thicker. I don't know, but this means I need to reinforce the legs, and this reminds me of the first time I cut open an IKEA shelf. And I call this wood! Now if the camera will ever focus, I can screw the legs back on and check if we got the height right. That's about 12 millimeters, but in the end I actually needed to shim up the saw a little bit, so this was a little much. Since we need to protect ourselves from the dark side, I bought 2 of these work lights. They are LED panels and 4000 Kelvin, and I think it really helps shooting better video in the workshop. I move them around as needed, but try to use the ceiling and sometimes the walls as a giant softbox. So I managed to pick up some wheels from a different store. These are non-rotating casters and they're not lockable, so I think I'll put these in front and the lockable ones in the back. I need to reinforce the legs, so I cut some construction timber to size. And here you can really see why I need a stand for this saw. Using it while on your knees is both uncomfortable and annoying. So apparently my 16 amp power supply in the workshop can't handle the startup demand on the saw combined with everything else running. This is 2 work lights, the normal lights in the shop, the Thor filtration unit, the Shepat chip extractor, 1 shop vac and the saw running. The solution I have found is to switch off the chip extractor, then switch on the saw and then switch the chip extractor back on. How do you guys handle stuff like this, by the way? Please tell me in the comments below. You'd think that since this table is factory produced that everything would be the same, but the size of the top cap of these legs are not uniform. So I have to cut each reinforcement to its specific leg. The fit was not perfect, and I wish I had some polyurethane expanding glue, but I didn't, so I used all the PVA in the known universe and hoped that would do the trick. By the way, can you guys suggest any expanding type of glues? I have since bought a bottle of Gorilla Glue, and you have to activate that by water, and also the bottle was really expensive, so do you have any suggestions? Now the next task is to route out the dedos for the side panels, but that will have to wait until next time. Because I have to leave you there for today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave a thumbs up. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. Also, you'll find a Patreon link and affiliate links to products I use and recommend below. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.